Hello, this is an interview with Jason Jones of the Vulnerable Peoples Project from episode 28 of The Stephen Herreid Show. Like and subscribe to The Stephen Herreid Show on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play, and follow us at Catholic Vote on Facebook and Twitter. I'm your host, Stephen Herreid. I'm joined now by Jason Jones. He's the head of the Vulnerable Peoples Project, and his work can be found at thegreatcampaign.org. First of all, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
So, what is going on? You're in Hawaii, and it is currently, unfortunately, ground zero for a new major progressive push, their new priority, which is physician-assisted suicide, which they call something like happy times death or something, Orwellian euphemism, right?
They're all Orwellian euphemisms. And it is ground zero. And this time it's not a false alarm. It's not North Korea. It's money from the mainland of the United States. We call it the mainland. This is the islands. You all are the mainland.
Right.
And so this is money from out of the state.
Yeah.
That has for over 2 decades now been aggressively pushing for physician-assisted suicide. Mm-hmm. And it has been every other legislative session or so a big battle. But now it has passed the House, it has passed the Senate,
right,
and it is on its way to the governor's desk. And our Governor Ige, has said he's eager to sign it. Now, something you need to know about Hawaii is that it is a one-party state.
Yeah.
There's a joke in Hawaii that Cuba will have 2 parties before Hawaii. And there's not one Republican in the state Senate. So this really is, reflecting on Cardinal Dolan's recent op-ed, evidence that when the Democrat Party has total control to work its will, it really closes all of the doors for participation of faithful practicing Catholics.
That's right.
And, even cultural Catholics. I think that you don't have to be a pious Catholic to know that doctors shouldn't be in the business of killing the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, and even beyond that now, because they say suicide is a civil right, and This is a civil rights issue. So if it's a civil rights issue, they don't even want to limit it to adults. They don't want to only limit it to the elderly, the sick, and the disabled. This is open to anyone who wants a doctor to write them a prescription to help them die.
Right. This is so sad. And it's funny, you mentioned cultural Catholics and other Catholics. Cardinal Dolan, of course, recently wrote that op-ed. Well, he said the Democratic Party has slammed the door shut on Catholics. And he's writing this with a sad tone in his voice. I mean, you could tell he was sad about it. He probably comes from a Democrat family. I think he does. Many Irish Catholics especially, but other Catholics as well, belong to the Democratic Party just sort of by tradition in their families. But the way they live is conservative, actually. The way they live is deeply in tune with the principles of our faith, namely especially the one that you bring up often, which is solidarity. These are people who care about each other and about people. And it reminds me a lot of what's happening in Hawaii now, because Hawaii has a culture that cares deeply about people and that has a conservative Christian way of living. It reminds me a lot of what happens with Latino Americans and Black Americans. According to Pew polling, Black Christians were more opposed to gay marriage and more firmly so than any other demographic group. Similarly, I think Catholics and Hawaiians have something in common, which is, in a way, we have our own culture, and that culture is being invaded by progressives. You see what I'm saying?
100%. Well, the campaign is called Kamaina for Compassionate Choices. Kamaina means children of the land. And when you go down to the legislature and you see the people pushing this, 90% of them aren't even living here or from here.
Oh, my gosh.
And the other 9% left, they're Howlis that have moved here later in life. Like me, I moved here when I was 17. They're not Kamaina. One of the leaders in standing up against this is a woman named Colette Machado, a native Hawaiian woman who is the head of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. You have Leon Su, who's a big Hawaiian leader here, a dear friend of mine. Yeah. They don't want to hear the voice of the Hawaiian community. And the Hawaiians are very conservative. They take their faith very serious. I think back to 2 legislative sessions ago, we had a big debate on marriage and on gay marriage. And it was a native Hawaiian state representative, Democrat, a homosexual, who came out and said, I cannot support same-sex marriage. It goes everything against my culture.
Wow.
And I represented a native Hawaiian district. I don't represent gay pride. I represent my community. But of course, Kamaina, they're not. Compassionate Choices, they're not. Right. They should really call them mainlanders for social experimentation in a distant polity.
Yeah, it's so sad because they like to export social experimentation. Our mutual friend Uju Ekocha, with her new book Target Africa, she talks a lot about that. There you go.
Right,
you got all the goods. That's right. But yeah, she talks a lot about it. It reminds me, in my conversations with her, I'm always like, Uju, you come from a small village in Nigeria. I come from a small village in Vermont, and I'm amazed at how much we have in common just because of our faith and our humanity. Like we're exactly the same in the fact that Vermonters, we complain about flatlanders, right? These foreigners coming up from Massachusetts and invading and trying to change our culture and ruining our families, right? And ruining our local culture. Same thing. She's complaining about that from a Nigerian perspective. You're complaining about it from a Hawaiian perspective. Catholics around the world should complain about it from a Catholic perspective.
When I'm in Iraq or when I'm in Sudan, it's the same thing. We have so much in common. And they'll always say, you are a good American, not like the other Americans we meet. Like, well, no, the folks you met from the State Department are not representative of Americans. I am. Right? Mm-hmm. I am an American. I like football. I like the barbecue. I love my children. I have lots of them. I take them, after this, I have to go to dance and karate. And we love our families. This is normal. We are normal Americans. We have so much in common. And Hawaii is the same thing. Now in New England, all the physician-assisted suicide bills that were flying forward in New England, they've all died. Yeah. But yet here in Hawaii, a state that the folks don't want it, but politicians that are easy to, bring on board. And it took them 2 decades. It was on Holy Thursday that the vote took place, and one Catholic state senator began to cry and say this is the hardest decision of her life. And I said to her, because probably I lacked in charity afterwards, I said, why are you crying? I said, you got to play your part in a dystopian novel as Judas on Good Thursday. That's really good timing.
Wow.
But it was on Holy Thursday that all of these Catholic legislators betrayed the vulnerable, kissed the vulnerable on the cheek. And we have to use our imagination to think where this is going. In the age of Tinder, in the age where marriage is going to be a thing of the past for these generations, they don't even date. They're not going to have children. They're not going to have grandchildren or nieces or nephews or cousins. Right. When they get older and when they get sick and when they feel unproductive, they're going to be lured into thinking they're making a choice to die. Just like the young woman who doesn't have a family and doesn't have a support system and feels unloved and is lonely, wanders into an abortion clinic because she despairs, because she doesn't feel loved. Right. This is the Catholic moment. This is the age of the laity. It is our responsibility to tell the truth, that the human person has an inviolable dignity, that we are called to live in solidarity with the suffering, not send them out of our view. A doctor in Hawaii, a friend of mine, Dr. Tommy Cook, testified against physician-assisted suicide. And he said, I, as a doctor, I'm not going to send a patient to a place they cannot return. We did that before in Hawaii. We send people with Hansen's disease, with leprosy, to Kalapapa, to Molokai. Right. And once you went there, you could never return. But what did our great saints do, like St. Damien and St. Marianne? I have my prayer cards like any good Catholic does in his office. Yeah. They lived a life of solidarity with the suffering. Yeah. And they went to where
they cared for the sick there. Yeah. Just to be clear, these were saints who, motivated by their Catholic faith, went out to those who were shuffled out of sight by the world, and they cared for those who suffered with leprosy off the island. They were totally separated and left to die. In fact, they were maybe being assisted to suicide. They were left for dead. You see,
it was sorrowful and it was chaos and anarchy when St. Damien arrived. By the way, the culture we have today, we inherited from people like St. Damien, from Queen Emma. There was a queen, and when her people had poor medical care and her kingdom was poor, she went door to door, raising money from merchants and elite and others to build a hospital, to build a medical center. Today, it's the Queen's Medical Center. It's a state-of-the-art, world-renowned medical center. Right. That was a gift from Queen Emma, St. Damien. So we live in the shade of trees that were planted a century and more ago. And now our state senator, legislator, and I pray not our governor, they're swinging an axe at these trees. And that's why I was so grateful to see that my bishop, Bishop Larry Silva, wrote an op-ed last week, just a couple days after Cardinal Dolan's op-ed, where he took a brave, prophetic stand for life. And I said to my bishop, I'm so glad you wrote that. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just imagine the Kamaina, the children of the land 100 years from now, when they look back, I want them to know at least somebody was planting a tree for them when everyone else seemed busy spending their inheritance and throwing their inheritance away.
Yeah. And for our listeners and viewers, pay attention. What's happening here is, you're agents for change in this world, you yourselves, but also it's really important to remember what is happening right now is potentially a major shift. What we're witnessing is Cardinal Dolan. That was an earth-shattering op-ed. Believe it or not, it really makes a difference. He said the Democratic Party has slammed the door on Catholics. Like I said, Dolan is not a guy who unequivocally hates the Democratic Party. This guy's a guy probably from a Democrat family. Many Catholics are. And he's saying, look, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. This is getting ridiculous. He wasn't referring to a physician-assisted suicide specifically necessarily, but just generally cultural leftism has become so central to the Democratic Party's platform that sane people, and particularly Catholics, can't feel at home there anymore. And that's major. Bishop Larry, same thing, weighing in against his own governor and the Senate in Hawaii. More and more bishops are waking up, and many more in the laity are waking up. And Catholic Vote itself, not only me as a mouthpiece and our president and our staff, but our listeners and the people who follow us and who are actually the Catholic voters we try to represent, I think we might be looking at a groundswell, a real change.
Yeah, and a lot of Democrats, it's very sad for them because their traditional home, their family's home has been in the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party, especially in the big cities, was an instrument for them and a tool for them. And it's got to be very hard. And it's not just Catholics, though. This radical identity politics is closing the door on the very people that they say they want to reach out to. It's really closing the door on Latinos. It's really closing the door on blacks. It's closing the door on people that still acknowledge the transcendent value of family, of solidarity. Look, if they target Hawaii with this, our state motto, which was the motto of the Kingdom of Hawaii, is the life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. In Hawaii, it is not uncommon to have 7 names on a mortgage because cousins and aunts and uncles and grandmas, they all live in the same house. In Hawaii, I'm telling you, my friends, they fight over where grandma's going to live, where grandpa's going to live.
Right.
They're not sending them off to an old folks home. The families will really get in heated arguments over whose house, who gets to have grandma live with them. When you go to a movie theater on a Friday night here, it's not like a bunch of kids. It's grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, cousins, nieces, nephews. It's family up and down and wide and across and filling up 4 rows. We're a family culture. We're a culture you'll see lots of children. You'll see lots of Down syndrome children still. Children with disabilities are not being euthanized out of existence through abortion here in Hawaii. So if they can target our state, why do they target us? Because it's culturally seems to be a no-brainer for our culture? No. We voted same-sex marriage down in a bigger margin than any other state. 3-1. It's because we're a small state. We're a one-party state, and that one party is the Democrat Party.
Right.
And so this aggressive, bizarre special interest came here and thought it was they could get the most bang for their buck. They're treating Hawaii as a laboratory. But if you Catholic Democrats listening, watching, if you call your local party, if you write the DNC, email the DNC, and you say, I know what you're doing in Hawaii.
Right.
I'm a Democrat. And they put pressure on Ige because they're getting pressure from the other direction. They're getting pressure from mainland special interest groups pushing this bill. There was a lobbyist. The lobbyist that's been carrying water for this bill for years brags about how he has everyone in his pocket. He openly brags about it.
Yeah. It's insidious stuff. And again, I see a great analogy. Catholics around the country and really across the world can look at Hawaii. They can see a foreign ideology. It's actually foreign to human nature, but also foreign to our faith and foreign to Hawaii, trying to invade and change a culture from within, from above, but from within. That's what's happening with our faith in general. I see a great analogy with that. So again, I just hope our viewers and listeners will look at the situation, see themselves in it, and see themselves as agents for change against that in their own lives, in their own states, but also, if they have it within their power, or if they're local to Hawaii, really at their fingertips, they can directly influence this situation. How would you advise they do that?
Well, if you're from Hawaii, you need to call and write Governor Ige. You need to call and write the Democrat Party. And if you're not from Hawaii and you're a Democrat, you're a Catholic Democrat, you take your faith serious. By the way, this isn't from Revelation. This is natural law.
Yeah, human nature.
The Hippocratic Oath wasn't written by bishops, right? But if you're a faithful Catholic Democrat, you need to let your party know that what you're doing in Hawaii, what you did to Lipinski in Illinois, it's just not staying in Illinois. What you did to Lipinski in Chicago, we can see in Ohio. What you're doing to the people of Hawaii, we can see in Pennsylvania. Let the party know. I can tell you from a friend of mine in the DNC that Dolan op-ed rocked the DNC.
Wow.
And so right now, they've got their antenna up looking for frustrated Catholic Democrats. And if you're a Republican, here's what I say. If they push this on Hawaii, we need to rout this. This party needs to cease to exist as a major political party because it has moved itself outside of what it is to be an American, outside of the Western tradition, and it is shrinking to some bizarre ideological party that, should exist in Europe in the 1930s. Not in the United States today.
It's so foreign. That's right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jason. We've been talking, of course, with Jason Jones. He is the head of the Vulnerable Peoples Project. You can find his work at thegreatcampaign.org. And also keep an eye out for what I usually talk to you about is movies, production of movies. So keep an eye out for that as well. You give the word when there's a really life-supporting Catholic principles bolstering movie on the way. So keep us posted.
I'll give you a hint.
That.
There's a big movie coming in September, and I can't wait to tell you about it.
All right. I look forward to that. Thanks again, Jason. We'll talk to you soon.
God bless.
Well, thanks for listening to this interview from episode 28 of The Stephen Herreid Show. Again, you can like and subscribe to The Stephen Herreid Show on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play, and don't miss the rest of this episode. I'm your host, Stephen Herreid.
On your mind, oh yeah, baby.